Welcome everybody. I see a couple of people still coming in. If you want to take a second and introduce yourselves in the chat, let's just get a little friendly. Say where you're from, why you came here. Maybe you're in the wrong session. Who knows? Just giving you a second to reconfigure yourself. Um, but we're just going to go ahead and get started. If it will let me. There we go. Hello. There we go. As mentioned, I am Audrey Richardson. I am teaching and learning specialist over at George Mason University Libraries. I use the pronouns she and her, and I will also kick that to David to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm David Lemmons. I'm the instruction coordinator, work at the same place as Audrey. I use they and he pronouns. Thanks for being here. We're really excited about talking about this.
Yeah, and as you could probably imagine, we have a really fun time, so we hope that you also have a fun time with us today. So, as an introduction, obviously we just introduced ourselves, but we'll give you a little bit of our institutional context and a couple like thank you acknowledgments going along the way. So, George Mason University is at Fairfax, Virginia, right outside DC. Don't say it's part of DC because people get super mad if you're in Virginia or Northern Virginia. At the moment, we are about 40,000 students. We are the largest public university in the state of Virginia. And I'm just going to add this in while I'm here, but we are a primarily minority serving institution. So our minority students are in the majority, which makes things super fun, especially with instruction. Um, we have approximately 35 library instructors across teams and campuses. Fairfax is the main campus, but we also have a campus in Arlington and we have a campus in Manassas for our science and technology students. And when we say library instructors for today's purposes and for our purposes at work as well, that includes staff and faculty. There are folks with their MLIS, there are folks without their MLIS, but they are all instructing in some way, shape, or form. As far as acknowledgements go, this would not be possible without, I feel like PBS, viewers like you. This would not be possible without a couple of folks within the library. So Alyssa Faringer created our original Omeka platform. Um, that's a lift that we didn't do. Uh, Megan Reichel and Amanda Bourne helped with creating the structure. So one helped with the original, and then we did some updates recently. So both of them have worked in that aspect. And I'm going to butcher this name really good, but old Wally G did some recent technical support as we changed some of the structure and how we were able to provide access to this. So just wanted to make sure that they were acknowledged for their work because while we are presenting and we are the stewards of this and what we do, it would not be possible without other folks. So let's take a look at the Curriculum Center. Um, while I'm clicking the link, and hopefully this works to my liking, the Curriculum Center is a place where faculty or instructors can put their lessons and submit them so that we have like a repository for other people to pull and um, fix things to their liking. So it's like a shell course or a shell of a lesson plan that allows other people to adapt it to their styling or liking. For example, you saw our slides were very colorful and fun. That is not everybody's jam. So you're welcome to like pull things and use them as you see fit. From the main page, it just gives a little bit of background information about submissions, which I'll click on that link up there in a minute. David's information, if you have any questions, you can always email them. You can also email me, but they are a little bit more in depth with it, so it probably gets kicked to them anyway. And then the library's homepage. Um, for our submission page, so you can add a lesson or a resource, we give a lot of information before you even get to the actual Microsoft form. So you know what you're getting into before you take the time to do the work and put it in. Or as my favorite, because Microsoft and I are nemesis, if Microsoft restarts itself while you're putting stuff in, you might want to work on it ahead of time. So it allows you to It talks about the evaluation process, which we are kind of not doing. But it also talks about what types of lesson plans, what needs to be available for it to be successful in this platform. Additionally, you can browse all of our resources, which is my favorite way to look, but you can also browse by like specific topics that you may be looking for. So right now, this includes all sorts of resources, such as lessons, but also different handouts you might need to adapt for your own class. So this handout, you might want to use it, but then put your information at the bottom so the students aren't emailing the wrong person. Um, Infographics, all sorts of fun stuff are in here. We have the logo in here in case you need to find it quickly, because I know I can't find it when I need it, or like the proper version of it. Um, what else was I going to say? In the browse by function, you can look by the resource type, so lesson plan or resource, as well as the course guide. And then you can also just do an advanced search as well, or regular search or an advanced search. Advanced search, you can look by our assessment plan. So we have a student learning assessment plan. If you need a specific one, you can find it that way. David, have I covered everything sufficiently? Is there anything that I might have not clicked on?
Do you want to show them what like a lesson plan looks like?
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
And can I also
Um,
mention that everything you see here is open to the public with a Creative Commons license. So I put the link in the chat. You're welcome to go in there and poke around, use,
yeah,
adapt.
let's see, what's a good one? We'll do 6 degrees or less to K-pop, because why not? When you land on a page, it will say who the creator was, what the title is, when it was created, as well as if and when it was modified. So you'll see a lot of these right now have a 4/23/2024 modification date because of some updates we'll talk about a little bit later. Um, it gives what it is, so if it's a lesson plan, infographic, hyperlink, what have you, as well as a description. Um, Like I said, we have Student Learning Assessment Plan, which is a great acronym with SLAP. We each year we try to tie things to specific lesson plan or to specific outcomes of the SLAP. So you're able to like search by that and know that like this is going to reach a goal for the year. Um, the activity types, so it shows that it has an individual worksheet as well as a group worksheet. Um, it can be a 60 or 75-minute class. It's giving you an idea of how much time it will take the course it is typically used for. That doesn't mean it has to be used for English 302, but this was what its original purpose was for. Um, Audience, as well as the any tags. So if there's any specific tags you want to use, we can put those in there. And then the media is here. So if you click on it, it will, hello, perhaps. Yes, it will open. It'll allow you to download the content. It is done this way so that you're not blindly downloading and then being like, "This doesn't make sense to me." You can see everything ahead of time and then be like, "Okay, this might fit my needs," and download. This gives you like a little preview, kind of like an abstract to an article before downloading or asking ILL to download it, because we don't pay for articles. We don't have to. But yes, everything has the rights, the Creative Commons license, and people have to opt into that. If they don't, then it doesn't go into the Curriculum Center. And they can also pull it at any point in time. We haven't set any, correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't set any like rules around that. But if someone's like, you know what, I really don't want my name on this, this isn't great, they can tell us and we will pull it from the site without an issue. Now I'm going to shoot it over to David.
I see a question in the chat to share the link again. So I'm just going to type that while I talk, and I'm going to take my life into my hands here. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about like how the Curriculum Center worked historically, how it works now, that sort of thing. So the Curriculum Center started in 2020, and a question that you might be asking yourself is, the question I asked myself, Why might we want to make a repository like this? Why would there be a center like this? A couple of reasons that we had at the beginning of this process where we wanted to break down silos. Audrey talked about we're distributed across 3 campuses. We're distributed across 6 or 7 teams and a bunch of different divisions within the library as well. So um, there was a lot of siloification going on between our lesson plans. Like, for example, would special collections share with our scholarly production people? Would they share with us? Not that they weren't willing to, but there wasn't really an easy way to share outside of your team and to share and adapt outside your context. We also wanted to share our expertise. Audrey and I are part of the teaching and learning team, but there are lots of different expertises on our campus. Science technology librarians, like I just mentioned, scholarly production people that do a lot of different things, a lot of cool things. We wanted an opportunity to share cool things. Additionally, what we wanted to do with this curriculum center was to cultivate some shared expectations about what is, in our context, good teaching. What does, let's say, high quality instruction look like for George Mason's library people? Those are some of our reasons why. I get the distinct honor and pleasure of giving you the most boring part, which is just sort of the timeline. So in its original 1.0 edition, the Curriculum Center was for Mason only. That is to say, the submitters to the center were only Mason folks, but also the users and adapters could only be at Mason. So it was designed as a George Mason University resource primarily. We had submission via a Microsoft form, and there was a peer review process in place. Again, Audrey alluded to that. There was like a quality assessment. There was a rubric. That was sort of like the idea. The original idea was that this was like the highest quality lesson plans as evaluated by a team of people. In 2022, we'll talk about this in the lessons learned, but you might be thinking to yourself, that would make me nervous. And yes, it made a lot of people like it kind of depressed our submission rate just because like who wants to be evaluated by like a council of your peers? So now we're in a process where myself, where Audrey, where my boss, Moya Kirker, might evaluate a lesson plan for its completeness instead. So instead of being evaluated for quality, it's being evaluated towards a checklist. So does it include an assessment? Does it include an activity? That sort of thing. In this year, 2024, we'll call this 3.0, we have extended the submission to the University of Mary Washington, which are some of our colleagues in Fredericksburg, Virginia, based on a partnership between our 2 universities. Additionally, we expanded access to the center to be everyone. So Audrey mentioned you'll see a lot of like April 23rd, 2024. That's a day in which I blocked off time on my calendar to make some of these lesson plans public. So that's sort of the 1,000-foot view. Again, the timeline part of how this repository works. Technology. In 2020, we put together this repository. So the part that Audrey just showed you, the website part is powered by Omeka. Originally, it was by Omeka Classic, now Omeka S in 2024. Additionally, what we used to do was we would put the plans like metadata more or less for discoverability in the Omeka site, but then put the lesson plan in Microsoft in SharePoint to hide it behind the Mason login. Now, though, now that it can be open to the public, we can just put everything in Omeka. So we're using Omeka S, and we can talk more about that if you're interested. Free preview. It's been a little easier than I expected, but maybe a little bit intimidating to look at right at first. I said it was a free preview, and here's my slide to talk about Omeka. So Omeka is our digital scholarship team uses it, and it's like a digital collections software that can be used in a variety of contexts, including making a lesson plan repository. We already had Omeka installed on university servers for other purposes. We have a digital humanities librarian, that's Alyssa, who helped make the Omeka in the first place. She is a really heavy Omeka user. What we have found, I guess maybe I won't speak for Audrey, I'll say royal we, just me. Omeka is user-friendly, and it's pretty easy to add like custom descriptors. So like instead of calling it like a tag, you can call it something else. Instead of calling it a subject, you can call it a learning outcome, that sort of thing. Additionally, we were able to upload items directly into Omeka nowadays as a place to host our site, more or less.
All right. So Now I get to talk about a little bit more of the pros and cons, the more fun stuff. I feel bad that David got to introduce all of the like techie stuff. If you know us, it is very much a reverse usually, but that's okay. But a little bit of reflection because that's what we do the best. Um, Obviously, there are pros. English faculty could use it. So if, say, we went through a time where we didn't have as many people on our team that could go into an English classroom, but if they knew what they wanted or needed, they could use from this site. They could also use any of the info. Like I've even seen in some of the classes I've been tapped for that they are in like they just have our stuff in their Blackboard site, soon to be Canvas. So they could pull from this. You could put. We had to post a course guide because we needed a permalink. So David is in the process of writing a book with some of our other colleagues, and they realized that they needed a permalink for the work that they were doing. So they were able to post that course guide within there. Um, Standalone resources weren't in the original scope, but then it was like, why not? Let's just put whatever anybody wants that needs to be shared, because there's nothing more scary or frantic with you finding a worksheet that you need hours before a class and you don't have an editable version, you just have a PDF. So expanding it to have those resources was a definite pro and a place for them to live so that when someone, say, leaves an institution or leaves a team, it doesn't go with them and you have to hunt it down. As always, with pros, there are cons. Workload. I just alluded to this, but at one point, David, would you say that was in like 2020, 2022? Our team specifically that I was hired into was down to employees. um, Everybody has had issues with hiring or hiring freezes. Um, so, with that whole idea of a review process and going over things and making sure we were getting submissions, looking at that workload um, down to employees, it could be a lot. Um, Slight learning curve with Omeka. Any technology has a little bit of time that you need to learn it. David and I recently went through it and they gave me a very detailed paperwork of how it goes. And I was like, can you just show me? I'm very visual. So once that happened, I was like, oh, this isn't so scary. But when you look at the back end for the first time, it's like, yikes, spikes. Um, Removing the peer review process because of low submissions. Um, Nobody wants to feel like they're being judged or graded any anything like that. Um, Nobody wants someone to say this lesson plan is trash. Just because it's not your cup of tea doesn't mean it's not someone else's. So removing that peer review process definitely up the submissions. Currently, there's only 14 in there, and that comes down to comfort level and going public. When we had those conversations about going public, David emailed out to everybody that had something submitted saying this is going out into the greater world. It is discoverable. Are you still comfortable with your content being on there? If you're not, we will remove it before going public. And nobody's information was public until they gave us a yes, with the understanding that it could be pulled at any time. And we did have some people opt out because they were like, this isn't my best work. And I was like, that's fine. I mean, I can still find it, but it just, doesn't go out into the world. And then as far as lessons learned, it takes time to set up and to get people to use. It also takes time to get people comfortable with submitting. So I know some questions in like the opening conversation of like, how did y'all get people to submit things? It just time. Um, Breaking down silos, always hard, always ongoing. But I think we're in a really good place we have a lot of new librarians coming in and a lot of new staff coming in that are excited about learning new stuff. So that might make it easier. Technical stuff is intimidating, but also easy. Like I said, the first time I opened the back end, I was like, I don't know about this, David. And then we walked through and I was like, oh, this is actually easier than like WordPress at this point. Um, and then, as mentioned multiple times, peer review, very helpful, but also lowered submission rates. So now we've just turned it into a checklist. Does it meet these title headers and these specific things? Um, if yes, and they are happy with it and they want to submit it, why not post it? Why not put it up? Again, they're able, people are able to contact us and say, I have an updated version. Can you please update this? Right now, we just changed the university just changed its logo. So a lot of the standalone infographics and those sorts of things are going to need to be updated with the new logo or new information, the new color scheme. They changed some of our Pantones, which I could talk all day about. But there are going to be some updates needed, and we're open to those whenever those are needed.
Audrey, can I jump in before we get into the thank you?
We sure can.
Sorry. I just
Nope.
wanted to sort of double down on the idea that so the original concept of this is that we would be sharing among each other as library instructors, but there was a pro on the pro slide about English faculty being able to use these lessons. We liaise, Audrey and I, our whole team liaises with our English composition department. Um, English composition at George Mason is like the writing classes, and there are approximately 10,000 students taking those classes every year. As you might imagine, that's a lot to manage. It's a really large department. It's been helpful to have a place to go where people can not only access the lessons, as Audrey said, but it's also a way that we can kind of represent our work to those people who are a little bit more external to library instruction, but still within our institution. Like it's been a helpful marketing tool, I think, for us to be like, I know that when you think about library instruction, you might be thinking of this, but there are a lot of different things that we're equipped to do. We can do your more traditional library instruction, or we can have students brainstorming research topics based on how connected they are to K-pop, right? So it's been helpful, I think. And thanks again, Audrey, for letting me jump in and just share about this. It's been
Absolutely.
helpful for us in our work, like talking to that department and helping to represent who library instructors are to that department.
Um, no, that's very important. So thanks for adding that. But I would also add another layer to that cake of we our university has a ton of adjunct instructors that work at multiple institutions, and there's different expectations for what the librarians or library staff can and can't do. So this kind of helps also solidify that relationship of like, oh no, I'm not coming in and taking over your class so that you can be off, or that sort of thing. But it does give us a place to be like, here's an example of some things that we can do for you. We're not going to do citations. We have a writing center for that. We're not going to do X, Y, or Z, but this is where we can help you. Um, so yeah.
I'll say one more thing and then we'll probably kick it to questions. I'm sorry. I just have something else to share on my heart. Audrey knows this is classic me. It's also helpful in training new library instructors. Audrey talked about this, but like when Audrey joined our team, when people join our team, there's lots of people besides Audrey who have joined our team. It's helpful to use this as a part of the onboarding process to say, like, for example, Audrey wasn't new to teaching, but if she had been, to be like, hey, this is what we're talking about. When we're saying lesson plan, this is sort of what we mean. And these are some places where you can start. So like if you're being asked to teach research questions, here are some places you can go so you're not just making everything from scratch as a new instructor. I don't know if people in the room have had a similar experience to me, but when I was a new instructor, I had to build a lot of my own things from scratch and just try it myself without a lot of training. I'm going to get off the soapbox I just got on and say instead that this is helpful in lowering some of those barriers to entry, because teaching is challenging, teaching is vulnerable, and having lesson plans. Somebody said in the chat, get back on the soapbox. Please don't tempt me. I
Make it
absolutely
taller.
will.
Please don't.
Please don't. Please do not encourage me. I don't need encouragement. Anyway, it's been helpful in lowering some of those barriers to, like, if you're new, you can start here and then cultivate your own teaching style over time instead of having to do it kind of just like in front of students trying something new for the very first time.
Also really great during heavy, heavy instruction season when your brain is like two marbles clacking around in there and it's like, I know where I can go and pull a lesson and just pop my name into it, maybe change the background a little bit. And it's a real savior for sure. Or last minute instruction request, you don't have as much time to prep, you can pull from here. Um, so yeah, we got through that very fast, a lot faster than I was thinking. But that means we have so much time for questions, um, which I am always happy and willing to answer. Um,
Attendees, you should be able to unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question out loud, or you can put something in the chat for our presenters.
I saw a couple questions earlier that
yeah,
maybe we can answer.
yeah, I'll read it. I can read out
Okay.
and you can say. So we have one that says, are the people who contribute to the plans mainly the librarians who have worked with the classes, or are they the instructors for the classes?
It's a great question. It's only the library instructors. So some of the stuff has been developed in collaboration with faculty, but it's really designed as a library instruction repository first and foremost. So it's just between us girls, just library folks.
And then also, does Omeka host the items, store them? If so, what kind of prices are involved for them storing? If not, where do you store the lesson plans and resources? How much storage space do you estimate for this?
I love this question. I admit that I'm not going to know the full answer, and I just want to be transparent about that as I'm answering it. And Audrey, please feel
Same.
free to jump in. Um, Omeka is a free open source software that we host on our library's servers. It is my understanding that the Curriculum Center did not involve any additional cost to what we were already paying for our specific servers, but I have to admit I don't know how much our server space costs. The items were originally stored again in our Microsoft OneDrive, which is handled separately. It was in my personal one, and then we made a group SharePoint after a while. Anyway, y'all don't need to know about that. Now they're stored directly in Omeka. Omeka itself offers storage, but we're storing it on our servers, just using Omeka as a like a front end. We're not storing it in Omeka in the back end. Hopefully that's helpful. I would be very happy to follow up with you via email. If you want to take down our emails, they're in the chat. Happy to chat more. We can talk to the people who run that server.
Yeah, we don't run it. We just
Right. Like we run the center, but the server, yeah. We I'll read maybe this next question that's in the chat about lesson study. So is lesson study a part of your shared practice? Here's what I would say to that. And Audrey, again, feel free to jump in. Yes, and it's more intentionally included as part of onboarding, like studying what the lesson plans that are out there. Is part mostly of onboarding and then also of like a person's self-directed professional practice. For example, I mean, Audrey and I get the submissions to the center, so we get to look at all the lesson plans as they come in and we're like, ooh, that's kind of cool. But like other people might go in there regularly to see what's out there, see what's new from our colleagues. I can't say that it's like a more mindful part of shared practice. Also, I'm specifically not asking the question asker's name out loud, but feel free, if I'm misinterpreting your question, feel free to unmute or write in the chat. Make sure I'm answering it well. How was that, Audrey? Does that sound fair?
yeah, and I think so. I also would say that this is part of us trying to break down some silos within the library. For a little bit of background information, all of our subject specialties are in separated teams. So we have arts and humanities team, we have a science and technology team, um, social sciences, and then we're teaching and learning. Did I get all of them? I think I got all of them. Yes. Um, so everybody is this is very specific to me and my needs. I don't know why I should share this way or share that way. Um, but we are all going towards like the same goal of making sure the students can successfully research and use our resources. Uh, so hopefully like this like idea will become a shared practice as more people submit, as more people use it, as more people see value in it. Not to say they don't see value in it right now, but shared value, I think, is where we're headed with it. We have people that are interested that are in other departments now, so it feels like it's a little bit it's catching on. The fire's spreading a little bit.
Yeah. Somebody asked if we could share the template. We're using a template that is like, I'll say quote unquote native to Omeka. It's one of the included templates. It's called Center Row. And our specific back end template, like the way that we're setting up the lesson plans, we can share it. Just send us an email. Like how we set up the descriptors and all of that. Again, the really interesting stuff, the logistics that I got to cover earlier. I'd be happy to talk your ear off about boring stuff, like a list of descriptors.
We have another question. It's like, can you mark items as new when they are submitted? What features do you like best with Omeka? Well, first of all, I'm going to write down that idea because I think that would be helpful to write
Great
down
idea.
what's new. You can, what's the word? You can filter or like make it shuffle by like date submitted or date updated, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but having like a little new with like a sparkle, because I'm going to put a sparkle on it, I
You and
think
I
would
are
be
on the same
super
page.
helpful.
A sparkle.
And what features do you like best with Omeka? David, I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah, so what I like about Omeka is it is really easy to customize, and it is like specifically set up to be a repository of digital items anyway. Like that's what Omeka is kind of meant for, digital collections. So it didn't take a lot of work to customize our Omeka instance. It was literally just renaming descriptors and choosing what we wanted to add. And that is like, again, Audrey and I had the same reaction when we saw the back end of Omeka. We were like, oh God, what is this? What have we gotten ourselves into? It is so much easier to use than you think. So that's what I like. It's really easy to customize and use, and it is specifically designed for something like this, so it doesn't take that much customization.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's super easy and simple to use, and even for the like on the back end side, it's easy, but even on the front end side, it is easy. Because like this was one of the first links I was sent when I started at Mason. I didn't originally start on this team. I've shifted around, and I was like, "This is so nice." It's just like a web page of stuff that I can learn from, which is what I appreciate. I also like that you can add tags, you can search by so many different things within it. So if it does get really large, if we do get more like I'd say at 25 plus submission on there, and it gets to a point where it's like, I know there's something in here about X, Y, or Z. Like I could put anime or K-pop in it, and it would pop that to the top. So I like having that ability to search.
Someone asked how this relates to our librarians' use of something like Primo, so peer-reviewed instructional materials online. The fact that I just remembered what that acronym stood for really shocked me because I'm not normally known as somebody who's strong with acronyms. Primo is a great resource. I use Primo all the time. I think it's helpful. So Audrey alluded to this with our institutional context. George Mason is a commuter school. We're a majority minority institution. We have a number of students outside the traditional age group, a lot of working students. Our population is pretty dissimilar to other R1 institutions, is what I would say. Maybe not all, but a lot. what we find, again, I'm using royal we here, what I find, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, is it's helpful to have things with our context in mind already, like freshman level writing, junior level writing in the disciplines, but with a large number of community college transfer students is one example of something that's helpful for us to like, we don't have to customize it quite as much because it has our population in mind already and our teaching style in mind already, but it's designed as a complement to Primo, not like a replacement to Primo, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an add-on, not a version 4.0 or anything. But yeah, I think having our students and our like users context in mind really helps with forming what the expectation is from the faculty side as well as from like our side as like a new instructor or a seasoned instructor that has come to a new environment that's completely different.
At my institution, I'm reading a question. At my institution, some of the library instructors like to use Kahoot or other interactive programs students can access on their phones or laptops. Does your repository include these types of interactive parts on the lesson plans? Yes. And links to things, we make part of the requirements is that somebody has to upload a lesson plan document at least, and that lesson plan has to include links to things that you can't upload as a file. So things like Kahoot, things like Google Jamboard, which is imminently an RIP situation, things like Padlet, Poll Everywhere, things that somebody might be using to interact, you have to have links on the lesson plan itself. So yes, I'll give you an example of that. I saw your question in advance and I downloaded something. Haha. Audrey, I'm going to switch to my screen
Oh
share.
yeah, take over. I will stop. There you go.
So this is an example of one of our lesson plans made by Christopher, one of our colleagues, and there's a link to a Kahoot right here. This particular one is about evaluating information. So this Kahoot is about that. Different source types, that sort of thing. But yeah, there's like,
and I think,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead. Nope. Nose goes. I think something that at least I have thought about going forward is like making sure that people are sharing them in a way that someone can take it and make it theirs, as opposed to, so like, for example, I use a lot of Google Forms not Google Forms, RIP, Microsoft Forms for, what's the word I'm looking for like scavenger hunts and that sort of thing. The links that I provide within this are duplicate links, like so it forces the user to make a duplicate. It doesn't give them access, and then all of a sudden I'm getting all of their information. So making sure that people are giving access in a way that they know how to, either like instructions on how to duplicate, or they're providing links that are you're not the owner, but you can have your own copy or copy links, is super important. But yeah, you probably can't tell from today. Usually we have activities and all sorts of flood the chats and that sort of thing. This is not our usual jam to just like talk for a long time. So we have a lot of active learning, and those types of links are added there.
Yeah, and the lesson plans include, like you just maybe saw briefly, like how much time an activity is meant to take, all the directions you use for an activity. So including some active learning is a requirement. As Audrey's saying, I'm not necessarily sure this presentation would fit in our lesson plan repository because it doesn't include a lot of active learning. That being said, they have to include step-by-step directions that you can replicate. For example, there's a complex activity I'm thinking of that's in there that includes multiple sets of handouts that are distributed to different groups at different times. There's a long list of directions in that lesson plan on how it works. Yeah. Somebody asked about the Omeka forum. So like, do people share information on the Omeka forum? Yes, it's forum.omeka.org. It's very, very helpful. We are very lucky to have an Omeka expert in-house, but that forum is also really helpful. When I don't want to bother our friend Alyssa, I try to go to the forum first to answer my own question. And sorry, Audrey, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but somebody asked if GMU uses Omeka as its institutional repository. We use DSpace as our institutional repository. Omeka is primarily used for like digital humanities projects.
Yeah, I was gonna think, I think it's DSpace, but
We call it Mars.
Yeah, to the moon.
Mm.
So we have a question. How do you encourage folks to submit lesson plans to this repository? I know you mentioned taking away the peer review was one way, but do you do other kinds of outreach to encourage submissions? Full force. Just kidding. Typically, I would say that people are comfortable with. Let me preface this. Pre-opening it, people were very comfortable with asking questions about like, how can I submit? Is that like, will you go over my lesson with me? Does this make sense to submit? That sort of thing. And then we do a call out. And David, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically we'll do a call out to be like, hey, end of the semester, any good lessons? Please feel free to submit with the submission form. Um, you can't force people to submit things, you can encourage. So, for example, if I was in a class with somebody that they like, we co taught, and I was like, hey, you made a really cool lesson plan. We should probably think about submitting this. Um, but otherwise, I'm not sure of what other tactics were done before I joined the team.
I can share that. So Audrey and I are on a team that, as part of our duties beyond like teaching undergrads how to write research papers, is helping our fellow library instructors develop as instructors, like develop their teaching skills. So we run, for example, a summer workshop series designed for to provide the basics of pedagogy, perhaps like the sort of foundational stuff. And we use the Curriculum Center heavily during that series. I promise that I'm answering your question, person in the chat. And I will say that we use it a lot as users during our professional development session. So we'll say things like, go through the Curriculum Center, find a lesson plan. What do you think about the assessment? How might you repurpose this to fit your own context, to fit your own style? And I think one of the ways we encourage people to submit is by encouraging people to use it. I find that when it's at the front of my mind, and I mean, Audrey and I run this center, so like when it's at the front of my mind, I'm more likely to submit my own stuff. So we try to keep it on the forefront of people's minds. For example, Audrey talked about the student learning assessment plan. And when people submit their reports at the end of the year for their assessment, our colleague Ashley encourages them to submit their lesson plans to the Curriculum Center as well, because we want to kind of keep sharing all of these things with us. So we try to share with our new instructors, try to get them to use it as users and adapters, and then they might be more likely to submit in the future. Hopefully that helps. Somebody has a really excellent idea in the chat. So the idea is maybe an end of semester submission party. A, love a party. B, the next part of this idea, which I love, is provide some food, and then people can have time to submit their lessons, and perhaps a group effort may be appealing. Consider that idea written down.
The joys of being at a public institution and trying to get food for an event, though, I
Joyce,
oddly know way too much about the different fun types and how we can use them, um, especially in these economic times. Anyway, but yes, I would love to have like let's have food and have a submission party.
does anybody else have any other questions? These have been such great questions so far.
Yeah.
I think I plucked that question right out of Audrey's brain.
I mean, I've been on presentation mode for like 4 weeks with something for work, so I'll be happy to not be on smile mode for a little bit. Um, but David did pop our emails back into the chat in case you need them. Um, just pausing in case people are still typing.
Somebody said this would have been helpful when they started and they can't wait to bring it to their instruction team. A, thanks for the kind words. B, let us know how we can be helpful. I would say that neither Audrey nor I is like a tech wizard. I would say Audrey more than me, but like this has been a surprisingly low, I don't want to say low tech, but I want to say it does not require any technical wizardry to maintain.
And I'll also say, because I just remembered this, in case anybody was wondering, if David and or I submit, someone else reviews our submission. We don't say pat on the back, 5 stars for Gryffindor or anything like that. It's very much like somebody else will review it and be like, yes, this does fit the criteria. We're not just doing it ourselves.
Somebody said something in the chat that is literally a way that I have used this, which is that they've been wanting to make a repository especially useful if someone is out sick and someone else has to suddenly teach that class. That happened to me. Somebody was out sick and they were like, hey, I was just using this lesson from the curriculum center. Can you teach on my behalf? And it made things so much easier, especially on the individual who was sick. They didn't have to email me their lesson plan.
Right. They could just be out sick.
They could just say, hey, I'm using this. It was great.
And thank you for the kind words. Someone said that they loved seeing what we had done and eager to look at the repository more closely. Thank you for your kind words, because, you know, we're like Tinkerbell. We thrive with encouragement.